Class is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon on our findings from some recent research we've done into the experiences of those who work in the further education sector on education for sustainable development. My name is Charlotte Bonner, and I'm the National Head of Education for Sustainable Development, or ESD, at the Education and Training Foundation, which, for those of you that don't know, is the expert body for professional development and standards in the FE and training sector in England. We also work alongside the Society for Education and Training, which is the country's largest professional membership organisation for teachers and trainers in the UK. So it's really good to welcome you here today. This is what we're going to cover over the next hour. So we'll do a little bit of context setting, why this research was needed. Then we'll let you know what we did and what we found, most importantly. And then we'll finish with a discussion of how you can use the data and some signposts for what's coming next. Throughout the session, feel free to use the chat box, the questions box. Sometimes I'll answer questions as and when, sometimes I'll wait until the end. So do send those through and I'll keep an eye on them throughout the session. Also to let you know that the session is being recorded today and we will be available on the ETF's website later this week. So hopefully that's what you came along for. You don't feel like we've brought you here under false pretenses. So we're going to crack straight on with a little bit of context setting for education for sustainable development and why particularly this research was needed, why we wanted to undertake it. So when we're talking about education for sustainable development, obviously we need to think about what actually sustainable development means. And I personally think this is about using resources mindfully to ensure that on a day-to-day basis, our individual but also organisational and national societal operations are not only financially viable but most importantly kind of environmentally sound and socially responsible, so that we don't let one kind of area dominate at the expense of another. And there's a well-known definition that talks about the needs of the present generations as well as future generations. So making sure that we can protect what our future generations need to have healthy, prosperous lives within a thriving environment. And although they're not without criticism, I find the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which you can see here on the screen, a really useful tool for introducing the themes of ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. And they're a collection of 17 interlinked goals, which were designed to be a blueprint for all to achieve a more just and more sustainable future. And they were established in 2015. And were signed by all 193 signatories of the UN General Assembly. So really widespread buy-in to these goals. And I think they quite clearly and simply demonstrate the breadth of sustainability, as well as the interrelationships between them. So some of them are biospherical, kind of environmental goals, looking at climate action and life below water. Some are social goals and look at kind of our social responsibility to people. So whether that's through good health and well-being, no poverty, quality education. And some are about the economic structures that we use within our societies. So looking at decent work, looking at sustainable cities and communities. And all of them are underpinned, kind of the axis in between all of those donuts is partnerships for the goals. So really focusing on how we won't achieve these goals in isolation. They have to be done through collaboration. And the other thing I find particularly interesting about the goals is that sub-indicators on all of them, every single one, reference the power of education and the need for educators to help support the development and the achievement of these goals. So they're really useful for grounding education for sustainable development. And UNESCO are probably one of the, well, they're definitely internationally at the forefront of education for sustainable development. And this is what they say it's all about. It's all about empowering learners to take informed decisions and responsible actions to help meet those sustainability goals, whilst respecting cultural diversity. It's all about lifelong learning, and it's an integral part of quality education. And for me, looking at the further education and training sector, ESD kind of falls into one of two ponds, and that they're interrelated too. And one is about developing sustainability specialists. So people with the skills, the knowledge, the behaviours to go into jobs which are directly related to our ability to meet sustainability goals. So, the fact that our sector is perfectly placed to train renewable energy specialists, for example. But then also kind of horizontally, broadly across our sector, the ability to develop a understanding of and a passion for the solving of sustainability challenges across all of our learners and all of our communities, whether that's our staff, our stakeholders, our partners. It's a really powerful role that the FE sector has to play in terms of achieving those sustainability goals. And it's not just me that believes this. There's a huge number of drivers at the moment to really encourage the further education and training sector to deliver good quality education for sustainable development. Some of those at a really high level. The government's 10-point plan for green industrial revolution was published just before Christmas. There's a really overt commitment to long-term sustainability within the UK. We're the hosts of COP26 this year in November up in Glasgow, and the government's really committed to making sure that we are absolutely seen as leading the climate action agenda internationally. And of course, some of those commitments will be directly relevant to the FE sector. We can already see that in the responses of IFATE, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, with their Green Apprenticeship advisory work, looking to review all of the occupational standards that they host, as well as developing a sustainability framework for trailblazer groups. There was the Climate Action Roadmap for FE colleges, which was published last year, really powerful tool for colleges, but actually it's transferable to all sorts of other provider types too, to look at their organisational approach to sustainability. The Green Jobs Task Force last month published their recommendations to the sector as well as to industry to say, okay, this is what's actually going to be needed to deliver on the government's green jobs commitments. There's a huge amount of learner demand for sustainability action, and you'll see from our findings today that comes through with the workforce too. And there's business demand, groups like the Aldersgate Group and organisations like National Grid and CBI. There doesn't seem to be a month go by without a new policy paper saying, yeah, the green skills agenda, the sustainability skills agenda is really important to us, and we want to see that mimicked in our education system too. So there's a lot of demand for ESD across FE, and to make that happen is going to take quite a shift. It's going to take time. Sectors don't transition and transform overnight, and I think it will take a mix of kind of top-down changes, bottom-up changes, and middle-out kind of more organisational approaches to truly embed ESD across the sector, so that we can meet kind of the demands that are coming from those drivers we've just outlined. And I think today's research, what we're going to cover, will hopefully inform those who are looking at policy change, funding changes, looking at innovation at an organisational or regional level. If you're an individual working in an FE and training provider, then hopefully there'll be information for you too. So regardless of where your kind of circle of influence is in the sector, wherever your kind of area of interest is, then there should be some data here that can help inform your work. So straight on to the findings, what we did and what we found. So for 3 weeks in February, we had a live fieldwork period. We had a survey that was designed using various different techniques. We used SurveyMonkey to get the survey out there, and we promoted the survey through a number of ETF networks, but also with our partners, the Society for Education and Training, the Association of Colleges, and the Environmental Association of Universities and Colleges. So promoted to various different networks and asked questions, different questions depending on your job type. So if you were directly involved in teaching and educating, then you were asked a particular skills question set. If you were had a different role within the sector, then you were asked a different set of questions. And we received just over 800 responses, so quite a solid response rate. We were very, very pleased with that. And we've spent the last few months analysing those results and preparing them for publication. The report went live last week. You may have seen that in some of the sector press. And we've hosted a number of webinars, some for SET members, and then today to really just outline the findings and discuss their implications for the sector. So what we found in terms of the headline results are here. So the rest of the webinar today, we will be talking through these findings and the themes that came out of them. So we'll go into more detail alongside the narrative this afternoon. But fundamentally, these are the results for you. The big headline stats: 74% of teaching staff feel they haven't received adequate training to embed sustainability in their work. The majority of respondents agree that the FE training sector has a valuable role to play in the achievement of sustainability goals. 68% feel that at the moment the education system isn't adequately educating learners on sustainability issues. But nearly all respondents believe that UK learners should be taught about sustainability issues, so that's often referred to as an ESD curriculum entitlement. Only 43% of people were familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals that I outlined in our introduction today. 61% of respondents report that to some extent are already actively incorporating sustainability themes into their work. 35% of respondents agree that the curriculum requirements support delivery of sustainability issues, so that's quite low. 24% of respondents didn't know what their organisational approach to sustainability is. And 30% of respondents feel that sustainability is an issue for all parts of their organisation. So those are the headlines that we've pulled out of the survey's findings. And in the main report, you'll see as part of the executive summary, those are there for you as an infographic, because those are kind of your sound bites, I suppose, from what we found. But overall, there were 5 key themes that came out of our findings. And what I'm going to do for the next section of the presentation is talk you through some of the results that helped us draw these conclusions. So they're colour-coded. We're not presenting all of the findings from the research today. That would have taken a significant period of time. But we just wanted to pull out the main themes and showcase those to you before discussing how they could perhaps be of use to you in your work. So these are the overall themes, and like I say, now we'll go through them one by one. So sustainability as a concept is broadly well understood. So people in the sector understand that sustainability is about that interrelationship between environment, society, economy, that it's about current challenges as well as future challenges, and that collaborations and partnerships are important to the sustainability agenda and to the achievement of sustainability goals. So you can see from this chart here, environmental issues were kind of top of the word association game that people were playing, that people also see economic issues, social justice issues, community issues as part of this agenda. And they see it with a future lens as well as with a kind of a current present lens too. However, despite that kind of concept being broadly well understood, the Sustainable Development Goals were less well perceived. So you can see here that the blue segment of the pie is the segment of people that had heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. So 43% just over had. So the majority of people in the sector hadn't heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, which I suppose isn't problematic per se, but given that they are the kind of most widespread set of sustainability goals that the UK government has committed to. They are global, they can be applied locally, and many businesses and organisations are now using them as their reporting mechanism for sustainability improvements. I found that personally quite surprising that was quite low. But broadly, as I say, the concept is well understood. And there is very much a widespread belief that the sector is very well placed to lead on sustainability solutions. So a few results here to back that up. You can see the blue and yellow bars combined make up the agreement segment of respondents in the first question here. So you can see that well over 90%, nearly 95% of people believe that all learners should be taught about sustainability issues. So that's all learners, not just those specialising in a sustainability issue or subject matter. But then conversely, when we asked them whether or not they felt that this current post-16 education system was educating learners on sustainability issues, less than 20% of people felt that that was the case. So people very much believe in the potential of the sector, but don't feel that that's currently being fulfilled. When we asked what kind of teaching respondents felt was appropriate for learners when it came to sustainability education, there was general widespread agreement, kind of 75% plus agreement on all of the following. People felt that there needed to be better political literacy, economic literacy, understanding of green jobs, understanding of social justice, climate change, and sustainability. So quite, again, this I suppose mimics back to that question about people's understanding of sustainability. People really do see it holistically and feel that there's a lot that learners should be learning about as part of their education. We then went on to ask about people's opinions around ESD, around the Sustainable Development Goals. And there's a couple of questions here that may be of interest to you. I think really positively, the bottom from last one, people feel able to make positive sustainability impacts through their job. So 60% plus of people feel that they are able to affect change in their roles within the sector, which I think is really positive to hear. And people feel very confident in their own knowledge and understanding of sustainability issues. So 70% plus of people feel that they have a good grasp of sustainability, which again reinforces what we learned earlier on. I don't know whether the resolution on the screen is high enough for you to read all of the findings here, but we'll publish, like I say, as well as the recording of the session, we'll publish the slide deck as well. You may already have seen the overall report. But I think the things that I want to pull out here is that there's a number of people, kind of 40% of people, that would like to include sustainability issues in their teaching and work practice but haven't yet. About 18% of people feel that they cannot include sustainability issues in their teaching and their work. And we go on in a little while to unpick some of the barriers that people are facing in bringing ESD into their professional practice. I think it's also interesting that 61% of people, this line here, 61% of people already actively incorporate sustainability themes into their work in some way. So this shows, I think this gives us a really positive springboard upon which to kind of further catalyse action. It's not as though we're starting from zero. There's a lot of people who have already been working on sustainability within their roles and within their professional practice. But there is a confidence issue that I think we perhaps need support. So despite sustainability issues generally being widely understood, people feel less confident to be able to teach others about sustainability issues. So you can see this bottom line here, just over 55% of people feel confident to be able to teach others. So there's quite a gap there if we're expecting all learners to receive some ESD content as part of their education. So generally widespread belief that the sector is well placed to lead on sustainability solutions. Quite a mixed response in terms of where people's personal practice is already at. There was also a really significant belief that diverse subject specialisms all have a role to play. So traditionally, you could argue that sustainability has been seen to be the realm of geographers or of particular types of science subject learners. But our respondents very much told us that no, they're looking at this from a whole host of different subject specialisms, and we'll come on to that shortly. But we did ask about the barriers, particularly looking at those respondents who said that they weren't yet including any sustainability content in their professional practice. And this is what came back. So the biggest barrier being cited is the curriculum and the study programme. And we've done a sister piece of research to accompany this that we published next month, and that's an audit looking at ESD content in the formal curriculum. I've spoken to a number of awarding organisations in the last few months, and some of the biggest names in the awarding organisation business, and all of them that I've spoken to are looking at two things. They're looking at what is their specialist provision. So do they have the right portfolio to say, yep, we have qualifications here for people who are trained electricians but want to retrain in how to install electrical vehicle charging points, or we have the right qualification portfolio to help support those moving into the renewable education sector, for example. So every awarding organisation I've spoken to is looking at their specialist qualification delivery, and then most of them are also looking at how they're going to weave sustainability as a principle through their curricular or study programme provision, in the same way that they do numeracy, literacy, digital skills, equality and diversity themes, for example. So although it's not in the curriculum and the study programme for many educators now, I'm hopeful that awarding organisations are really looking at data such as this and adjusting their content accordingly. We've also then got lack of guided learning hours, which is very much something that came out in the open responses to some of the questions as well. Educators really feel very stretched. They have a commitment to sustainability, they have a commitment to their learners, they see the potential of the sector in helping support sustainability delivery, but there aren't enough hours in the day, and they feel very much like they have had more and more content to deliver in their learning and teaching practice, and that they're concerned that this will be another subject that they have to embed. So really need to think about how we support people to have the time to address sustainability in their professional practice in a way that feels manageable and aligns with the capacity that the sector currently has. We then have lack of personal knowledge, which correlates well with kind of the figures we've already seen. People generally have a good understanding, but don't necessarily have the confidence to bring that into their teaching and learning practice. And then we have some of the top-down drivers, so lack of encouragement in here. Ofsted are named, but throughout the research we saw a number of different top-down drivers that were cited as both enablers, but also things that currently prevent good ESD practice. And then interestingly, we have lack of student interest there at 23%, which I personally think is particularly interesting, given there's extensive research, particularly from SOS UK, looking at learner demand for sustainability. And pretty much every provider I talk to at the moment says that the student voice around sustainability is very strong. So I find that a particularly interesting response too. So lots of challenges there, but as I said, I took great inspiration from the 61% of respondents who said, yep, we're already to some extent including sustainability work in our practice. And here we've got a couple of word clouds showing some of the responses. So here are the subject specialisms that were cited by respondents giving us examples of how they'd included sustainability issues into their work. And what you can see here is that, yes, geography is there, and yep, there are some science-based subjects there too, but there's also a real diversity in the subject specialisms where people are bringing sustainability content. So whether that's languages, whether that's humanities subjects, whether that's vocational subjects like construction, design, technology, hair, beauty, catering, animal management, there's a real host, a real breadth there of subject specialisms where sustainability content is already being delivered. And similarly, from a sustainability themes perspective, there's a real diversity in what people are including. So you can see here some of it's about behaviours, but also people are bringing different sustainability themes to their teaching and learning practice. Some of which mimic the Sustainable Development Goals we talked about earlier on. So wildlife and nature, climate, emissions, some of those kind of biospherical environmental issues, and then some that are much more social. There's some words like responsibility, health, needs, personal engagement there too. So some of that kind of societal lens coming to some of the subjects that are being taught with regards to sustainability. And then some that are more kind of systems focused, which you could argue would kind of relate to that kind of economical lens as well. So a whole host of different subjects being discussed, being brought into teaching and learning practice. And also a whole host of pedagogical approaches as well. So we asked people to give us examples of how they'd incorporated sustainability into their work. We've coded those and created these word clouds. And from a pedagogical approach, there was a lot of discussion around discussion and debate, about student research, student presentations, quite a lot about partnering with external organisations, bringing in experts or going on field trips. Quite a lot of the examples cited were about using sustainability scenarios and examples in people's teaching and learning practice, and that was particularly the case in subjects such as maths. So people were bringing sustainability challenges to a maths class and then using maths to resolve or help contribute to the solutions of those challenges. So there were people doing carbon footprinting, people looking at distances to ascertain levels of plastic pollutions, for example. So you can see how some of it was very much based around the subject of sustainability, but some of it was using sustainability examples to teach other skill sets. So overall, the conclusion of those word clouds is that diverse subject specialisms all have a role to play and that people already are bringing sustainability into their practice. So although it may feel like we have a long way to go as a sector, I think there's an awful lot that we should celebrate and recognise too. We then went on to ask people about their organisation's approach to sustainability and sustainable development and ESD. So the organisations that they work for, what are they doing? And the conclusion that we came to is that basically different providers are at different stages of their ESD journey. When we asked people to rank how well they felt their organisation was doing to positively impact sustainability, this was the bell curve that we got. So you can see some people very much feel that they're at the beginning, their organisations aren't doing enough. Others felt that their organisations were doing as much as they possibly could. And then there's an awful lot of people in the middle, somewhere between kind of 2 and 8. So a really diverse set of approaches from an organisational level with regards to sustainability practice as perceived by people that work for them. And when we asked them to go into more detail, we could see some really positive responses here, I think. People that work for organisations for whom sustainability is an issue for all parts of the organisation. So they're really taking a whole institution approach. For others, it's very much a strategic priority. And then really interestingly, I think the third most common response was, I don't know. I don't know what my organisation's response is to sustainability, which suggests that organisations need to work on their communications around sustainable development, even if they are at the beginning of their journey, to say, okay, this is a new thing for us that we're going to be working on. But definitely organisations need support to do that communicating well. And then you can see there's kind of in decreasing levels of importance, other things that people use to describe their organisation's approach. So for some people, it's about legislative compliance. For others, it's about teaching and learning. For others, it's an estates issue. For others, it's a way to enhance reputation. I personally thought it was really promising that a teaching and learning issue was seen as higher up the ranking than an estates and facilities issue, which is traditionally where sustainability has sat within the education sector. But of course, the main impact of education is through the impact you have on your learners. So the fact that that's now being seen as more common response from an organisational perspective, that sustainability is a teaching and learning issue, I thought was very, very promising. And then conversely, we looked at the barriers, and some of these you can see reflected in the barriers that individuals saw in bringing more sustainability practice to their professional work. Some are new because they're looking at an organisational perspective. So there was quite a lot of discussion around prioritisation of other issues. It's simply that sustainability has never got to the top of the list. There's always been something that has taken a greater priority for the organisation. Again, lack of staff resources and capacity and time, we've talked about that. And then financial resources and financial security, also very high there in terms of what barriers organisations face in doing more on sustainability, because of course there are savings that could be made through, for example, efficiencies in terms of how you use your estate, but of course investing in the time and the capacity to really explore what sustainability means for your organisation and developing a strong sustainability strategy does take time and resources. And then we've got some of the kind of the top-down barriers too that were already cited. So kind of lack of regulation is cited there too. So a whole host of positives, and then a whole host of things that we can work on as a sector to really support organisations to do more on their sustainability agendas. The next theme that we're going to explore is that the FE workforces have had very little training on how to deliver quality and impactful education for sustainable development. So you may remember earlier in the presentation, we looked at people's broad understanding of sustainability, which was strong, but then people didn't have as much confidence to bring that to their professional practice. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why. So again, I'm going to ask you to look at the green and the maroon lines on this bar chart. which collectively are the disagree lines. And so we're looking at between 63 and 74% of people feeling that they haven't had adequate training to bring sustainability into their work, whether they're a teaching member of staff or a non-teaching member of staff. And that's both training for their current roles as well as training that they've received to date. So, I mean, obviously the Education and Training Foundation, we are a professional development organisation. This is particularly one of the things that we wanted to better understand as part of the research. What training had people had? What training needs do people have? And so we also asked them about their preferences for further enhancing their understanding of education for sustainable development. And by far the most popular option was through online learning and resources to enhance their understanding, template resources for people to adapt and adopt in their work, as well as regular updates on ESD, and then short courses with a mix of live group and individual learning. They were all fairly popular. And then of less interest was specific resources for students. They absolutely wanted resources for themselves. Less interested in practitioner research around sustainable development, and peer-to-peer networks and long courses. So I think what I take from this is that it aligns with the feedback that people gave us earlier in the survey about being time poor, the capacity issues that the sector faces. So people really want training and learning opportunities that align with their current workloads. So things that they can undertake in their own time, things that they can adapt and adopt that kind of make life more efficient for them, where they can easily bring teaching around sustainability into their practice. So those were the headlines from our survey. The report's available now on the ETF website, alongside a number of press releases. You might have seen the sector press, a few outlets have picked up the stories that they've taken from the research. And initially, we did the research for ourselves. You know, education for sustainable development is a relatively new area of interest for the Education and Training Foundation, and we really wanted the insights that we needed to inform our work and to make sure we were giving the best value to the sector and really helping drive change. But what the results soon showed us was that actually the data would be valuable to a whole host of different people, which is why we've published it, why we're hosting the webinar today, and why there's so many of you on the call, I imagine. So I also wanted to just give a little bit of thought to how you can use the data. It might be that you work for a policy unit, a sector body. It might be that you work in workforce development for the FE and training sector or for your organisation. It might be that you're responsible for progressing sustainability in your organisation, or it might be that you're an educator, practitioner who wants to bring ESD into your practice with more prominence. And there's, I think, benefits for all different roles from the research that we've published. First and foremost, it can inform your ESD work. So it's a robust evidence base with which you can inform your own practice. So whether that's looking at best practice from elsewhere in the sector, whether that's looking at the sector's needs to inform your work, whether that's looking at what people see as the biggest barriers as a way for you to start prioritising. Hopefully this data will help inform your own education for sustainable development practice. It can also be a starting point to open the conversation up to colleagues. So if you're one of the people that feels that your organisation isn't yet progressing ESD, then this is a great piece of research to say, okay, here's some findings that are taken from across the sector. Do these reflect our experiences here within this college or this training provider or this adult learning service? What can we do? What support do we need? You know, it's a really good way to open that conversation with colleagues to explore how you can develop your own sustainability practice at an organisational level. I think it's also going to be useful for people who are communicating sustainable development. So better understanding your audience helps you frame your communications well. And so there's a whole host of information within their findings that I think will help you really frame sustainability well so it resonates with your audience, if your audience is people from the FE and training sector. Might also give you the evidence that you need to help advocate for change. So, for example, we're applying for funding for a number of different projects that we know the sector would benefit from. We're using this data to evidence that need. Might be at an organisational level. You're looking to go to your board, your governors for investment in ESD. This kind of data can really support your arguments to say, look, there's drivers for this across the sector, and there's a need for support here, here, and here. Here's the evidence that shows that. And you might also use it to benchmark your impact. So you might say, okay, well, this is the national picture. How does that translate to our picture within our organisation or my particular professional practice around ESD? So it could use it as a good indicator of how you're faring, whether that's at an individual or organisational level. To help you use the data, we've created 2 accompanying resources to the report. One outlines different ways that you can use our data to create change, and the other is a set of prompting questions to help you use the research to further your ESD practice, both individually and at an organisational level. And all 3 of those are available on the ETF's website, et-foundation.co.uk/ESD. We also signpost from there to a number of different resources that already exist to help support the sector with their ESD practice. Some of those are ETF designed and delivered, and some of those are from other parties whom we thoroughly recommend you use their resources. Definitely don't want to see any duplication across the sector with the ESD work that's going on. So it's a really good starting point to explore what's available and also what's coming next. What a beautiful segue. So as I said earlier on, ESD is relatively new to the ETF. We undertook some research both with this survey, but also our audit of sustainability in the curriculum to really baseline where things were at, but also to inform our approach. And we've done a lot of consultation work over the last, over the course of this year to really understand what our strategy should be. And that's going to be fourfold. So this is what you can expect to see from us when it comes to education for sustainable development, recognising that teachers and educators, as well as leaders and governors and professional tutors, personal tutors, other professional support staff from across the sector all need support to translate sustainability into their professional practice. So that's where we come in. We'll be looking to embed ESD across our offer, as well as to create new ESD support. So in the same way that I talked about awarding organisations doing this is exactly our approach too. So we'll be weaving ESD across our CPD offer, as well as creating new specialist support in the form of CPD courses, but other resources as well. We're also doing a lot of work with sector partners, so other sector bodies, sector agencies, to really support a more enabling environment for ESD for the sector, recognising that some of the barriers that people face very much are sector-wide ones. So working with others to create that environment where ESD is more easily prioritised by organisations and practitioners. And then finally, the 4th bit of our strategy is all about our own internal practice and making sure that we're walking the walk when it comes to sustainability too. So touch wood, that should be the easier bit of the 3. So what that looks like in terms of things that might be of interest to you, like I say, we've got a second research piece published within the next month. And as well as the audit, we've got a host of case studies within there, looking at different leadership types, leadership approaches to embedding ESD within the curriculum across a host of different subject specialisms, across a wealth of different types of provider, looking at different drivers, different motivators for bringing ESD into the curriculum. We've also got a resource coming looking at how to embed ESD within different subject specialisms. And a curriculum mapping tool that goes alongside that. So you can look at where your existing ESD practice within your curricular provision is and how you might want to enhance that. We're seeking funding for an ESD for Educators CPD course. And we're also doing a review of the resources on the Excellence Gateway so that you've got a really easily accessible, curated set of ESD resources available to you. So all that's in the pipeline. And if you're interested in any of that, if you want to inform any of that work, then please do get in touch. I'd very much welcome hearing from you. The final thing I wanted to flag before I go on to any questions was that we're hosting the Conference for the Society for Education and Training online on the 2nd of November. Really rich schedule of presentations and seminars, great networking online too, including some sessions specifically looking at ESD. So if you're not already registered, then I fully recommend a signpost to the website there and registering for that event, which I think will be another good one. So there's a couple of questions that have come in whilst I've been talking, and I'm going to go through those now. If you have other questions about the work that we've done, about our findings, about how you might like to use it in your own professional practice, about what's needed for the sector, then I very much welcome any questions that you have. So the first question here is, what are your thoughts about the current sustainability qualifications on offer for staff and as part of learner study programs in the sector? So I think what the research shows us is that there is a real demand for strong sustainability qualifications. And when you look at the policy briefings that have come from business and industry in the last 12 months too, there's a real demand there for both kind of occupational pipelines into sustainability related jobs, but also about sustainability skills being kind of a universal concept for learners. So the demand is really there, and the recognition that the FE sector is well placed is strong too. I think there's a lot of work to be done, both in terms of the qualification provision that is used, the curriculum that's used for those qualifications, and also the training for staff to be able to really deliver that content effectively. And I think today the research that I've shown and the research that we published last week really shows us where we're currently at with that work, both in terms of the curriculum, current educators' confidence levels, understanding of sustainability, and I hope that will be really well used actually by awarding organisations, by those involved in workforce development for the sector to inform further developments in those areas. Got another question here. I'm sorry, I'm reading and talking at the same time, which is challenging, but I'll do my best. So thoughts on green ESD accreditation for the sector to certify growth towards best practice and different milestones in the sustainability journey. What are my thoughts on that? So I think it's a good point. I think there's two things I think about immediately here when I hear the words kind of green accreditation, and some of that is through the formal curriculum. So what skills, knowledge, behaviours, attributes are people getting through the qualifications that they're studying towards and gaining through their being part of the further education sector. And I think, as I said, we've talked quite a lot about the awarding organisations and about what's currently there and what currently isn't there. The other thing that I think is potentially of use would be an accreditation and kite mark for organisations in the sector too, and that's something that we're considering in the midterm too. I think it would be really valuable for people to be able to celebrate what they'd achieved, but also have a framework to use to kind of work towards further developing their organisational practice. So I think there's scope for that. Definitely, but at the moment I would argue that that's probably we're a step away from that, and some of the real basics that the sector needs to be able to deliver good ESD aren't available, and that's why we're prioritising very much looking at what are those basics, and I think that's about increasing that confidence and that kind of educators' confidence in ESD, so that whatever's brought to them through the curriculum specifications or whatever's brought to them through their organisational strategies, that they're able to deliver. Okay, next question. Let's have a look. Oh, I love this question. This is nice and easy for me. Will the webinar be available to share with other members of staff who could not attend this session this afternoon? Yes, it will. We are recording the session and it will be available on the Education and Training Foundation's website as soon as we can make that happen. So I'm going to commit us to within a week. Let's see if that's possible. I think it is. So yes, the webinar will be available. Okay, next question. This is a great question. Your survey results show that most people think they understand sustainability. Did you assess the extent to which that was true? My experience is that people think they understand it, but often that may not be the case. So I too was cynical when I saw how confident people felt in their understanding of sustainability issues. My initial reaction was to be cynical of that. But then when I looked at some of the survey findings, particularly where people were discussing the different types of practice that they'd brought to their teaching and education work, the kind of sustainability themes they were bringing into their professional practice, the kind of themes they associate with sustainability. Actually, I think it's pretty good. I think people do understand the sustainability agenda fairly well across the sector, and that, that's a broad generalization, but I think the research does show that, people have got a fairly good understanding of the breadth of sustainability. Of course, there are people that responded that do not, and some of them were very open and honest about that, and others you can see through some of the examples that perhaps they focus very heavily on one element of the sustainability agenda. But generally, I think that comprehension, that understanding is fairly strong. Okay, we've got 2 more questions at the moment. So is there any indication that the Department for Education are working to place ESD within the curriculum or inspection framework? That's an interesting question. I obviously cannot speak on behalf of the Department for Education, but they have recently set up a new climate change and sustainability unit, which I think is really a really positive thing for the further education sector and for other parts of the education sector too. And they're doing a lot of work in the run up to COP26, so I would watch that space. I think it's definitely coming. There's work being done to really progress the education sector's sustainability work. So, yep, I think, Cheryl, there is an indication that is happening. Okay, couple more questions that have come in. This is great. Thank you so much for them, and forgive my reading and my answering at the same time. So how much do people understand the concept of global citizenship? That's not a question we directly asked. And I know that there has been historically quite a lot of work being done into the promotion of global citizenship. And I think that the global citizenship agenda and the sustainability agenda are intrinsically linked. So if global citizenship is your area of interest, I would encourage you to look at the research respondents' findings. There are some questions that will be particularly of interest to you. When we look at the things that come to mind are the questions that where we ask people about their understanding of sustainability, also what kind of themes that they felt should be brought into learners' education that relate to sustainability. Some of those will relate to global citizenship too, but we didn't explicitly ask about their understanding of the concept of global citizenship. We've got somebody saying perhaps the issue is not understanding, but prioritisation, which isn't a question that I'm going to answer, but I'll respond to the comment. I think absolutely. And again, some of our findings showed that people really wanted to do more, but it wasn't a priority for a whole host of other reasons. The sector's had a lot of short demand, but very urgent priorities over the last decade, I would argue. So I think that's completely the case. Okay, the final question that I've got at the moment. Within the ESD roadmap, there's a call for more funding from local enterprise partnerships and councils to support local sustainability work. This is currently very difficult to find or access. Can I see this changing soon? So I think the ESD roadmap that's being cited in the question is probably the FE roadmap for climate action, which was published by the Association of Colleges alongside the Environmental Association for Universities and Colleges last year. And that looks at different approaches that organisations can take to develop their sustainability, and particularly climate action work. With regards to funding from local enterprise partnerships and councils, an awful lot of local authorities have within the last 2-3 years declared a climate emergency, and many of them are developing action plans to look at how they're going to translate that climate emergency declaration into action in their local communities. So I think getting the skills and education agenda into those discussions when they're action planning is really important. Some local enterprise partnerships are really progressing the green skills agenda, others less so. I think the findings from the Green Jobs Task Force that I mentioned at the very beginning in the context setting section has some really strong recommendations, not just for the education sector, but for the business and industry sectors. And it will be really interesting to see whether they respond to those and how they respond to those recommendations. But it's a really useful report to take to them to say, look, this is important. These are the recommendations for enterprise and business. How are we responding to that at a regional level? Some FE providers have done some really cracking work at building relationships with their local enterprise partnerships and got funding for investing in technology and infrastructure and facilities that relates to sustainability education, for example. So there's definitely some good practice out there. And yeah, I think it's one of those where each region will have a different response, but there's some good opportunities to build good relationships with your local enterprise partnerships, build good relationships with your local authorities to explore how that can turn into a mutually beneficial relationship that progresses the sustainability agenda within your community, as well as presenting opportunities for your learners too. Got another question here. Did you talk to the QAA as they have just released a set of guidance? So the QAA, the Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education, they worked with Advance HE to revise or produce a revision of their guidance for educators within higher education, looking at education for sustainable development. We were one of the respondents to their consultation on the publication of that guidance, and I've been personally involved with it for a very long time. It's a great document. If you're a member of Advance HE, then definitely go and check that out. And we're looking at how we can make sure that the work in the FE sector dovetails with work that's going on in other parts of the education system, but also provides kind of the specialist support that the FE sector needs. So I'm aware of it. I think it's a good piece of guidance, particularly if you're an educator wanting to bring sustainability into your work. And we'll look at how we can complement that with our work for the sector too. Okay, that's the end of my questions list at the moment. Feel free for if anybody's got any further questions, feel free to continue to type those in. I'm going to invite you to get in touch. My contact details are here on the screen. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if it's just an informal keep in touch, or my phone number or my email address are there if you've got particular things that you would like to get involved with regards to our work, or if you want any more information on any of the things that we discussed. As I said earlier on, we'll be publishing a second piece of research next month. That will be that's our final planned piece of research for ESD for the foreseeable future, and we'll be focusing on resources for the sector after that. But I hope it's given you a good overview of what we found, and that some of our findings will be useful to your professional practice, enhancing education for sustainable development too. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and have a good evening. Thank you very much.